Week 5 was another wild one in fantasy football, and we may have lost one of the best players. But let's jump into it, and let's start with the Thursday night game, Chicago versus Washington. And this went exactly as we expected. Chicago coming up and just steamrolling Washington. When you have a... Wait a minute. Wait, not how we expected. I don't know what happened here. Good defense meets bad offense, and somehow bad offense makes good defense look bad. It is what it is, but you got to be encouraged if you have Justin Fields. 2 games in a row looking good and has a great stretch of games coming up. On the Commanders side, not so much. Not only did they end the Bears' 14-game losing streak, but outside of Sam Howell, who threw the ball 51 times, and Logan Thomas, nobody had a nice fantasy game here. Terry McLaurin, despite all the passes, did hardly anything. Jahan Dotson still almost unstartable in fantasy. Brian Robinson got game scripted out. Antonio Gibson dropping passes. This was just a disaster. On to next week. Then Sunday morning, we had another London game, Jacksonville versus Buffalo. This one looked like it was going to be a complete dud until like the last 5 minutes of the game, and they went nuts, and it became a fantasy feast. So if you started almost anybody in this game, you're probably feeling pretty good right now. All right, moving on to the main Sunday slate, we got Titans versus Colts, and there's a lot to unpack here, and let's start with the Titans. Now, DeAndre Hopkins is proving that any wide receiver one can go off against this Colts defense. If you have a wide receiver one playing the Colts, start him. On the other hand, if you have Derrick Henry, you have to be very, very worried right now. It's not just the fact that he's only topped 80 yards once this season. It's not the fact that he's averaging less than 4 yards per carry. It's not the fact that he's only scored 2 touchdowns. I mean, that stuff happens. The worry here is Tyjae Spears. For the first time in a long time, Derrick Henry has legit competition in this backfield, and Spears looks great. Scored a touchdown today, is catching passes, taking third down snaps from Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is at the point of his career where he needs to be an absolute workhorse, and he isn't, because Tyjae Spears is just too good to keep off the field. You have to be panicking if you have Derrick Henry. He'll still be solid. He'll still have weeks like last week where he has a nice game and scores a touchdown. But I think you're going to get a lot of very bad games from Derrick Henry this year. So if you got Derrick Henry, if you drafted him in the first round or the second round as your RB1, you got to be panicked. Now let's get to the Colts. And look, Anthony Richardson landed on that shoulder. We don't know the severity. He didn't come back in the game. This would be a big blow for fantasy, no doubt about it. But the big story here is Jonathan Taylor. Welcome back, Jonathan Taylor, workhorse. Wait, no, that wasn't Jonathan Taylor, was it? That was Zach Moss. Yes, that's right. Zach Moss, workhorse running back with the return of Jonathan Taylor, who they're paying $14 million a year, by the way. But not only was he a workhorse, he looked great against one of the best run defenses in the NFL. Even if you told me Zach Moss was going to get this kind of work, I'd be like, maybe he scores a touchdown. Maybe he has an okay game. No, he looked great. And now there's got to be a real concern. Is this a committee going forward? Sure, Jonathan Taylor, we know he was coming back from not practicing, not playing in a while. He's going to get better. His conditioning is going to get better. They're going to play him more. But has Zach Moss earned enough of a role to make Jonathan Taylor no longer a true workhorse running back? We will see, but you at least got to be a little worried if you got Jonathan Taylor. Now, the Panthers took on the Lions, and look, no Amon-Ra St. Brown, no problem for the Lions. They handled the Panthers with ease, but you've got to be a little concerned if you have Amon-Ra St. Brown in fantasy, because this may be a sports hernia injury. Now, we haven't heard anything concrete. We don't know anything, but he didn't really practice all week. Pretty much doubtful from the get-go. We'll have to see how this plays out, but look, don't do something crazy. Don't panic trade Amon-Ra St. Brown and sell low. Even if he misses 3 to 4 weeks, it's okay. You can survive, and when he comes back, he should be a stud. Now, you probably should be worried if you have Miles Sanders, because last week, Chuba Hubbard had more carries. I chalked that up to Miles Sanders coming back from the groin injury. But Chuba Hubbard had more carries again this week. This looks like it's going to be a split backfield right now. Miles Sanders hasn't been very effective. Chuba Hubbard, I mean, he hasn't really been very effective either, but the problem with this offense is you need the running back here to get the bulk of the carries, because this offense can't support a running back getting limited touches, limited receptions. So if this remains a split going forward, neither of these guys are really going to have any value. So panic level has to be pretty high for Miles Sanders right now. The Saints took on the Patriots, and let's just start with the Patriots. They've got to be the worst team in the NFL right now on both sides of the ball. They are just an absolute mess. Can't do anything on offense, and there's no solutions here. You can't turn to Bailey Zappi. He's worse than even Mac Jones. And look, it's bringing down this whole offense. Now, granted, you're not starting a lot of these guys, except maybe Ramondre Stevenson. Right now, panic level has to be sky high for any Patriots, especially Ramondre Stevenson, because this offense looks historically bad. On the Saints side, Chris Olave had another down game after a down game last week. He did score a touchdown, but didn't do a whole lot outside of that. I'm not ready to panic on Chris Olave yet. It's been a couple of down games, but look, Carr's shoulder looked a lot better. He was throwing the ball deep. I think Chris Olave will be fine going forward. Panic level is going to be low on Chris Olave. Giants took on the Dolphins, and no surprise here as the Dolphins just laid it on the Giants, a complete mismatch. But I am still a little nervous about Jalen Waddle. Yes, he scored. And yes, he had 10 targets. That's great. But only 5 catches for 35 yards. I mean, I know better days are ahead for Jalen Waddle. He's too good, and this offense is just too good of an offense. But you got to be at least a little concerned. Maybe no longer a no-doubt must-start type of guy, but still a guy you're probably going to start in most instances. The upside in this offense is just too high. Then on the Giants side, Waller finally bounced back, but I mean, you can't be excited about anybody in this offense. Maybe when Saquon gets back, it gets better, but really, is he just going to save it? Probably not. The Giants offense is a mess and one you want to mostly avoid. And then Houston went to Atlanta, and look, Desmond Ridder wasn't great, but they won, so that means any chance of seeing Taylor Heineke in the near future is going to have to wait. And hey, Kyle Pitts and Drake London led the team in targets and receiving. Hallelujah. Maybe they're finally figuring it out. I don't know. Still hard to trust these guys, but you got to at least feel a little bit better coming out of week 5. And it was a down week mostly for the Texans passing attack, but there's no panic here. They're going to be fine going forward. Everybody has down weeks, not panicking on these guys. Baltimore took on Pittsburgh, and this game had an ugly game to it, but hey, somehow the Steelers won a game they had no business winning. But I mean, there's nothing really to talk about on the Steelers side. Like, they did kind of what you expect. Pickens had a big play. Okay, let's move on. On the Baltimore side, however, it was pretty ugly here. Flowers did lead the team in receiving in a great spot, but man, he was dropping passes. He was slipping on the field. Look, but he's a rookie. It's going to take time. He's going to have ups and downs. Better days are ahead. Not panicking on Zay Flowers. However, if you are still holding out hope for Rashad Bateman and Odell Beckham, might be time to let that go. Now, the afternoon slate gave us some really good games, starting with the Eagles taking on the Rams. And hey, Cooper Kupp is all the way back, over 100 yards in his first game. And the good news here is Puka was still effective. He was second on the team in targets, scored a touchdown. It looks like both these guys can coexist. And for only the second time all year, Kyron Williams didn't score. And like usual, when he doesn't score, he gives you basically nothing. But he's still got the lion's share of the work. Better days are ahead. On the Eagles side, pretty much all good here. Even Dallas Goedert had a big bounce back game. This was like tight end bounce back week. But it might have come at the expense of Devonta Smith, who had a very mediocre game. Did have an end zone target, but really wasn't catchable. But look, Devonta Smith has scored at least 14 PPR fantasy points in 3 games this year. He's going to be fine. Not worried about it. Panic level low for Devonta Smith. Then Cincinnati took on Arizona. And look, Arizona put up a fight for a while, but eventually Josh Dobbs became Josh Dobbs again, and Cincinnati pulled this out. But it didn't really affect Marquise Brown as he continues to put up good games week after week. If there is a concern on the Arizona side, it's James Conner. He left this game with a knee injury, did not return. We'll have to see how that looks. On the Bengals side, welcome back Joe Burrow. Welcome back Jamar Chase. It's good to see you. As for Joe Mixon, if you had any doubt going into the season that Joe Mixon was complete dust, that should be gone now. The guy got elite opportunity. 4 or 5 times he got a goal line carry and did nothing with them. Could not score. Looks terrible. Now granted, he's a running back getting all the touches in a great offense, so he's going to have value. He's going to be starter worthy. But man, this guy is nothing more than like a start him if you need him guy going forward. He is absolute dust, and I hope everybody is starting to realize it now. Jets took on Denver, and welcome back Breece Hall. Took advantage of this great matchup, had that huge 72-yard touchdown run, which he can do. Will it stick? Will he be able to do this against better defenses? We'll find out, but right now, you got to be feeling good. Unfortunately for the Wilsons, not so much, because even in this great matchup, Zach Wilson looked terrible, and Garrett Wilson did nothing. This was a game where I thought Garrett Wilson could finally have a good game in a great spot, and you could sell him high. Now, you're pretty much stuck with Garrett Wilson, and you just have to accept he is what he is. A low-end wide receiver 3. Yeah, he's going to catch a touchdown here and there. He'll have a long catch when he breaks a tackle or something, but for the most part, just a low-end wide receiver 3 with very little upside. And then for the Broncos, they predictably did very little against his secondary in the passing game. Didn't expect much from these guys. Didn't get much from them. Now, if you somehow got word of the Javonte Williams news in time to put Jaleel McLaughlin in your lineup, congratulations. The news came very late, so you might not have been able to, but you got to be feeling pretty good about McLaughlin. He's looked good so far this year in limited touches, and he's had to have been carving out a bigger role. Like, there's going to be no choice but for Sean Payton to give him the ball more, even when Javonte is healthy, who has looked far from good this year, looking like a guy coming off a major knee injury. I think we see more McLaughlin going forward and maybe less Javonte. And then finally, we had KC versus Minnesota. This had all the makings of a shootout. It really wasn't, but I will say, Travis Kelce gave us all a huge scare at one point, but then he came back in, caught a touchdown, and everything seems good. However, on the Vikings side, we may have lost Justin Jefferson for a while. He left this game with a hamstring strain, did not come back in. It's not looking good. The only thing I could say here is injuries suck.